All right, right on. Well, welcome everybody. I'm really looking forward to being here with you guys today, and I'm super excited to have a special guest, Dr. Marc Morris, in the house. For those of you guys who don't know Dr. Morris, Dr. Marc is actually a doctor in nutrition. He's a certified strength and conditioning specialist. He was actually the head coach of Team Canada for powerlifting, if I understand correctly.
That's right. Yeah,
And
you
he
bet.
is currently the founder of the Dr. Marc Method, which teaches people and trains people to become nutrition coaches themselves, teaches them the science and the systems to own and operate their own business, and to be able to help people and make money in the process. So I'm super excited to be here today, and thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Marc.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I'm excited to chat. I always like, connecting with, it sounds like in terms of the group, a lot of like-minded individuals and people on similar paths, be it with their own, personal nutrition, fitness, mindset, that type of stuff, as well as probably opportunities to help others and entrepreneurs and that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to chat.
It's awesome, man. Right on.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we could start by just giving us a little bit of a background, and I'd be curious to know kind of like how did you first get your start in fitness and nutrition, and how did those two come together for you?
Yeah, I think like I would assume very similarly to most in terms of playing high school sports, realizing, I got to start lifting weights and get into this stuff to get better and improve, and then realize there's this whole other world of uh, people taking not only resistance training seriously, but strength sports seriously, and there's a whole competitive environment with that. So kind of starting to get interested in that, and at the time, really trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life in terms of career and stuff and that type of thing, and always being into science, but not really sure where to go with things. And I think I remember at the time being in my undergrad, and this was like 2005 to 2009, that type of stuff. It was really disjointed in terms of like either you're like in hard science or kinesiology and like health and stuff, and like health coaching, nutrition coaching. Those opportunities just like they weren't really like the internet's kind of really put it at the forefront of things. It just wasn't really. You either became like a personal trainer or you went into like food science or maybe dietetics and stuff. It's just there wasn't tons of opportunities. So I was always trying to like figure out what would I do, and I ended up um, just getting really interested in it and going to university for chemistry, because I was interested in science and seemed like maybe I'd go into teaching or something along those lines. And I just remember being in that scenario, and I really wasn't in the right place in terms of, it lighting me up passion wise, but I was spending so much time in the weight room, and I had a good group of people around me that I ended up just working through it, then realized I could apply for, graduate school and graduate degrees in nutrition, and realizing, hey, people are studying this stuff. And remember spending so much time on the internet reading and researching and being like, well, how do I maximize what I'm doing in the gym, and can I help others doing that? And maybe there's opportunities. And then ended up applying for grad school, and even then getting to that point, starting to get a little bit closer to what I wanted to do, and realized that I want to work with people. I don't want to be in the lab. I want to, work with people. So I started coaching during my PhD, in terms of starting my own business and that type of stuff, and just realized, hey, that's my place. That's what I want to do, and started working with others. It took off in terms of the beginning of, I would say, CrossFit did a lot for many of
Mm.
us in terms of opportunities with people investing in services and different things. So working in a bunch of those gyms and getting clients, and then starting to do that stuff. And I've been doing it full time ever since. So it started as what do I do for myself, but really turned into man, I can make money doing this and help others, and fulfill my passion and that type of thing. And now it's been gotten even bigger. So it's been really, really cool. But that's more or less like how I started in getting into it. And I know with my own program now, I really am trying to, minimize that learning curve, because I worked through so many things in terms of just throwing spaghetti at the wall and figuring out systems, but how to approach it and what's the right way. And I know for a lot of people that are passionate about this stuff, that's some of the most frustrating parts, is that, I don't know. I know what I want to do, but I don't know exactly what it would look like, or how to maximize it and how to turn it into something that's profitable. So that's kind of where I'm at now and the bulk of my work.
Oh, that's amazing. It sounds to me like somewhat of a trailblazer, and you found a way to kind of take two things that you were passionate about that maybe seemingly didn't seem to have a lot in common, and really
Mhm.
bridge the gap and bring them together to be of value, to be of service, and also do something that you love and make money at it at the same time.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. There's um definitely people before me. And I remember one of my big influences at the beginning being John Berardi from like Precision Nutrition. And I remember seeing
Right.
him speak at a seminar in 2006, and he was in a little bit of the research world now, and I'm not sure PN as it is now was really like I think it had been created, but they were, I think, more of a servicing clients as opposed to coaches at that point. I just remember someone in the going to the seminar and someone in the group asking, everything you're doing sounds amazing. Like, how do I do that? Like, do you have any, advice for someone that would want to get into something similar? And I remember at that moment, uh, you know, he's an amazing coach and educator and stuff, but that his answers wasn't very fulfilling to me. It was it wasn't all that helpful. It was more or less like, you go to school, you study, you read all the things, and you can be here too, which I mean, it probably is not far from the truth, but also just not like it wasn't very tangible. And I remember
Sure.
thinking, I gotta find a way to do this because I don't know exactly where to be, but I kind of saw his credentials and where the path was and try to carve it out for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Tony Robbins has been a huge, huge mentor of mine over the years, and I've had the
Hmm.
opportunity to attend some of his live events. One thing that Tony Robbins said that always stuck with me is that success leaves clues.
Hmm.
And to me, that just means that, if you know somebody who's doing what you want to do or who has what you want, like, connect with them, learn from them, read what they're reading, watch what they're watching, listen to what they're listening to, ask questions, copy
Hmm.
some of their actions and behaviors, and you're
Yep,
likely to get similar results. And it takes the guesswork out of it, and it
completely
saves you from
does.
having to make all those mistakes yourself through trial and error and things like that. And so I see a ton of value in what you do as far as kind of leading the way and then teaching people some of the things that you've learned in the process and saving them from having to make those same mistakes themselves.
Completely. Well, I think that I couldn't agree more. And I think the mentorship capacity, a lot of these opportunities just, yeah, I don't think they existed in the same
Right.
way 20 years ago that they do now in terms of these are services and things and partnerships and things that people can, formally invest in and do. And it wasn't necessarily in the same way. And I think we've just been really lucky with that sense, that and the internet just being able to, connect us in terms of, um, used to be local geographical area, and if you had
Right.
someone that was doing the same things as you, that's great. But in a lot of times, I think people were pretty disconnected in terms of, what was available to them and their interests and that kind of stuff. So it's come a long way in that regard.
Yeah, it's opened up big time.
Completely.
Um, I just want to pause here for a moment. And while I have everybody's attention, I was just going to say that if you guys have any questions, feel free to either pop it in the chat or unmute yourself and throw it out there. Dr. Mark has graciously agreed to answer anybody's questions and to be of any support. So if there's something specific on your mind, don't be shy. Cool.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. That sounds really, really good.
So,
Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, I remember going to an event a while back where we were in a room of probably a couple thousand people, and the question was asked, out of curiosity, who here would like to improve their health, lose a little bit of weight, or get in better shape? And like 99% of the room raised their hand and said that they wanted to improve their health, get in better shape, or lose a little bit of weight. And obviously I was a little bit intrigued by that, but I'm curious, like, what do you think is the biggest thing that holds people back from actually doing it? Do you think it's a lack of time, a lack of knowledge, a lack of opportunity or options, or maybe a lack of effort or accountability?
I think if you were to ask, I think a group of nutrition professionals that
Okay.
question, I think they would probably tell you misinformation has left a
Mm,
lot of people feeling like they don't know exactly what to do. They have an idea of what um, eating healthy and taking care of themselves looks like, but they're also like pretty confused with messages around like the media and influencers and what they should be doing, and it's kind of left them feeling like not know what to do next. So I think, I mean, that's definitely part of it. Um, if I was thinking about consumers and where they're at, is like they
sure.
just don't know what to follow, who to trust, and kind of go from there. I think the biggest thing is, in my experience though, is that they're lacking the structure to navigate this stuff and how to put it into action and how to take action and what that would look like. And I think in many cases, that's where like coaching is filling this gap, right? Is that there's like now opportunities for someone to, to work with someone, find some accountability, work things into place, have something to follow and go from there. And I think that is what, I mean, this is the type of thing. It's a service that people are willing to pay for and they want to do, and maybe just hasn't been, afforded or available to them historically, and now it is that kind of thing. So I think the biggest thing being it's like just something to follow that they can actually stick to, and having the right people to lead them down that path so that they're doing things that work within their lives and kind of go from there. And I think that'd be the biggest thing, is that in my experience is just like people don't they have an idea what to do, but at the same time they just don't know what that looks like and how to start and kind of go from there. And that's where, I mean, in terms of the dieting industry and that type of stuff, there's so much out there and available to them, but I think that's where people start to go down the path of thinking, I'm going to do something, kind of black and white restrictive because they feel like, simplicity wise, that's what they should be doing. I think it's the guide. I think that's the biggest thing, is guidance and accountability and structure is what most people lack from getting started.
Yeah, I made the mistake in the past of thinking that I wanted more freedom in my life, to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. But I find
Mhm.
that I just get myself in trouble, and I
Yeah.
tend to drift and procrastinate and fall off track and that sort of thing. And I really thrive with specific instructions,
Mhm.
with clarity and with structure and routine. And so I can absolutely understand kind of what you're getting at
Yeah.
there. But
I think, I mean, obviously, based on what I know about you, is like you're pretty self-motivated and you want to do those things. I think there's a time and a place for us to like drift and maybe be like a little bit less, have like a little bit less direction, because I think it kind of like allows us to think about what we want and what we want to do and that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's um, the people that make progress and keep it and grow their lives and develop are the ones that like they seek out what they don't know and they listen and they put it into action, right? So it's one of those things where the better you can get at identifying what you want and what it takes to get there, it's just the quicker this loop is and kind of go from there.
totally, totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned kind of misinformation. And I know that, the internet and magazine covers and stuff, or we're bombarded with information about nutrition and exercise all the time. But what are some of the biggest myths and misconceptions that you face as a nutrition coach or a fitness expert here?
Well, I wanna preface this with saying like I'm very much not a nutrition slasher. So it's like if
Okay?
I mean I have science-based background, I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of theoretically what is right, if you will. But I also acknowledge like on an individual level, if it works for someone, it works for them. And I'm at the same time, I don't really
Sure.
care as much about as long as they're moving towards their health goals, not doing anything that's dangerous. They've found something they enjoy doing. It's like thumbs up, that works for me. I'm totally cool with it. So I'm less concerned about, you know, what is quote unquote true than what they need to be doing. But at the same time, there's many people, and I mean, I know the internet loves to call them snake oil salesmen and charlatans, and focusing on maybe like mistruths or just presenting things in a way that isn't completely true. So it's like there's things out there that I think people gravitate towards and think they need to do, um, that just may or may not be true. One good example is like if I thought about all the different camps and nutrition ideologies and things that people believe in of the last 20 years, I thought literally the only thing we could agree on was that like vegetables were probably good for you. And it seems like in the last 3 years, that's just kind of went the wayside in terms of carnivore diet and that type of stuff. And things that I thought were, somewhat restrictive in the past, be it like, paleo and keto are now starting to look almost like probably better than some of these things. So I think that one of the biggest ones trend wise right now is probably eating only animal based products, and this is coming from someone that like I'm very uh pro protein, pro red meat. I don't think you should avoid it. In so many cases, I'm just very anti avoiding plants at all costs, because in most scenarios, that's not what's going to be the difference maker in people's lives. Like that's not why. And I would say 99% of cases, people's health concerns are where they're at, right? It's the overconsumption of most things, which is, I mean, like it's just a tough concept to explain to people, right? In terms of the the context of this stuff, right? And what matters most and what matters least, and kind of go from there. So that'd be probably one of the biggest things. And I've been putting a lot of content out on YouTube, and speaking out about certain things and talking about stuff. And I definitely see it as like, when I speak out against some of these things, the people that cling to it and what they say, and it's very, very interesting. I can see them really diving into some myths, truths, and things that aren't necessarily true. So that would be, I'd be probably one of the most pressing ones.
Yeah. Okay. I
Yeah.
it's funny because uh you're right about even some of the things that you hear about vegetables and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
there's a couple of people that I have follow online and talking about how bad kale is for you and how it leaches nutrients out of your body and things like that. And it's one of those times where I have what I would think would be a fairly basic foundation as far as understanding exercise and nutrition. But I think even when I hear things like that, it's frustrating, it's discouraging, and it almost creates a situation where I just want to throw my hands up, and it's like learned helplessness, where it's like, well, it doesn't matter what I do, it's like I can't win almost.
Mhm.
So I can only imagine what it would be like for somebody who's either just getting started or who doesn't have a background in this kind of thing, and it's completely new territory.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice as to like what are like some of the first things that you would suggest to somebody who's just looking real basic level to improve their nutrition or their health or body composition?
Yeah. If someone wasn't going to like work with me, and I had like 30 seconds in an elevator with you, and I had to tell you like, here's what you should leave knowing, kind of thing. It's like,
Right.
it's not far from the advice that most people would typically think. It's like you need to eat more protein would be the first thing. Because I would say, after analyzing the diets of thousands of people, it's like that's one of the things that, for be it convenience or preparation or just education, they're not eating enough of, especially people that have body composition goals, right? You talked about that room full of people. People are like, I want to get leaner, I want to gain some muscle, I want to be a healthier version of myself. Protein is typically the thing that's lacking in most of those. So that'd be the first thing. And I'd say, um, based on the evidence right now, it's like the more you can avoid overly processed food, the better situation you'd be in terms of, that doesn't mean you got to swear it off entirely, but um, you know, packages, like just in general, it's like, try to avoid them. Stick with the fresh stuff for the most part, and you'll be in a better place. So if that would be like the starting point, is that's what I would tackle.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was gonna ask, I think that everybody's out there kind of looking for like the secret or like the missing pill or the like magic pill or something, so to
Yeah.
speak. And I wonder, maybe you just answered that, but what do you think that people need to know or kind of wrap their head around when it
Yeah.
comes to nutrition like that?
Well, I mean, maybe you'll find this interesting. Maybe you won't. We'll see. I think the
Sure.
biggest thing being within my coaching program, what I really try to teach coaches to do is like, there's a big difference between what we do to coach people and what we do to get them interested. I
Right.
know for a fact, like if I ask 100 people, do you feel like you're just like one small thing away from changing your health? Or like, do you think there's something missing that you're doing right now that would change your health dramatically? Like really focusing on that secret hidden thing that we're kind of alluding to. 90% of them are going to say yes. Like there is a thing. I wish I could find that thing and discover that thing, because it's going to be a difference maker. So from like a marketing perspective and getting people interested in this stuff, it's like we shouldn't overlook that. Because I mean, the way we
Right.
dress things up and get people, interested in stuff, is that like we might need to lean into the fact that they feel like they're missing something. And that to me is like, when people get their head nodding, it's like they're more likely to listen to us. And that doesn't mean that what we do on the back end to help them can look somewhat different, right? It's like we got to do what we got to do to get them in the door and open the door, so they can see what's on the other side. And then from there, they're kind of like, oh, this is why this is important. And this is why this matters. And even if it is somewhat basic, they're now seeing the results of that and kind of going from there. So that would be um, like one of the biggest things. But I think it's just human nature to think that we're just one thing off, right? I mean, it'd be the same thing in your business, right? If I could tell you one thing that would add, you know, 50K of income to your monthly revenue, like, wouldn't you want that thing? Like, of course you would, right? And maybe it's not necessarily that, but when we present it in a way that's believable enough and it's not that far away, we get people interested in this kind of stuff. And that doesn't mean it has to be like misleading or like, promise something that's completely unattainable, but we got to get people interested in this stuff and kind of go from there.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've heard the phrase sometimes that like sell them what they want and then serve them what they need.
exactly. Exactly.
You
And to
know,
me,
and
that's
again, that's
like,
not meant to be misleading or like the bait and switch or anything like that. But I think sometimes people think that what they need is very different than what they're actually need in order to achieve that.
so it's just getting a better sense of it's almost like there's going to be overlap between those things, but also start to
Sure,
look at them somewhat differently. Right.
sure,
And I think,
100%.
um, as a consumer of this stuff, I would just view it as like, is there someone based on what I want and what I feel like I need? Is there someone that could allow me to get there quicker and in a way that's more fun, in a way that, I can learn something as well as achieve results and keep them. And a lot of times it's usually, hiring a professional that can help you do that and someone you resonate with.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
100%.
I think the biggest thing is, and you're always paying for something, right? Be it either
Hmm.
paying with your time to figure this out on your own, which is in reality much tougher to do, because you're trying to figure things out. You don't necessarily know what's the most important, what's the least important, what needs the majority of your attention, that type of stuff. Or you're paying to for experience to make things simple for you and that kind of thing. And to me, that's what coaching is all about. Coaching's not uh, giving someone everything that it's giving them only what they need to take that next step, right? It's only giving them the specificity and focus to achieve something. And that's one of the toughest things to wrap your head around. But in my experience, that's always worth it because you get so much further faster. Um, and yeah, it's the best investment you can make.
Yeah, 100% agree. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if it weren't for the support, the guidance, the accountability that I got from my coaches and my mentors.
Mhm.
And I also couldn't stand here today and say truthfully that somebody else should invest in themselves and their coaching if I didn't feel that way. And I'm sure that
Exactly.
it's the same for yourself as well. So
Completely. Absolutely.
um, one thing I was going to ask you about is like you hear different times people talk about like, you know, body types or hormones or as you age things
Mhm.
change and things like that. How important are things like that for, you know, body composition or for nutrition, and would your requirements change much because of that?
For the most part, no. I think it's not the easiest no. I think there's aspects of like the way to almost view it, especially like hormonally and genetics and stuff, is like the scientific principles are the same, especially when it comes to things like weight loss and muscle gain. Like
Okay.
everyone is playing the same game. It's just that like hormonally and the things that like hormones, genetics, they can impact um like how like what you're up against, but it doesn't mean that it's like not like overcomable. It doesn't mean that like it's a completely different like system or process would be the biggest thing. Hormones would be a perfect example of that. Like um the biggest thing being like sometimes they can impact the amount of energy you're burning and stuff, which would mean like you can't eat as much if you're looking to lose weight, that type of thing. But it doesn't mean that the science is just completely discarded in terms of needing to create an energy imbalance to lose weight and that kind of thing. It just means that you're up against something that's a little bit more difficult. So for the most part, um, those are, I wouldn't say they're by no means excuses that people use, but at times they're things that people feel like is like their crutch and the thing that they're not going to be able to, accomplish or overcome because of that stuff. And that would be the biggest thing is that like, doesn't mean it's not doable. It just means that sometimes you're up against something that's a little bit harder.
Okay, yeah, might need a little bit more focus or have to be a little bit more dialed in or a little bit more.
Yeah, or maybe it's just going to be one of those things where it's slower
Mm,
because of it, or expectations need to be a bit more tempered
mm,
because of it. Not doesn't
right.
mean that it's not something that's achievable or something that isn't worthwhile. It just makes it a little bit more difficult.
Sure. Yeah. I
Yeah, yeah,
imagine that managing expectations is a big part of what
yeah,
you have as far as conversations with clients and with other coaches. Am I right?
completely. I think, especially with, I mean, I really don't like the kind of the bashing of social media that like everyone's telling a story and putting their best foot forward and that kind of stuff, because I think at the end of the day it is entertainment. And I think, I mean,
Sure.
who goes to watch a movie and thinks, oh, they got all dolled up for that? Like of course they did. Like
Yeah.
they're doing like it's like it's partially entertainment, but I know it's
Sure.
so ingrained in our worlds now that it's kind of hard to separate fiction and what's real and what isn't. So that part can be tough, but at the end of the day, um what I've really loved about like community events for like when people have like a goal, it's like, they send over Dr. Mark a picture of like Thor and they're like, I want to look like this, right? Like, what do I got to do? And it's like, go back and pick new parents, right? Like that's the first answer is like, you got a time machine. No, not that, but it's like going to like, if you ever been to like a natural bodybuilding show and see like some of the people that are there, it's like, hey, like this is more your lane, that kind of thing. And I remember like powerlifting, for example, you start seeing like masters athletes and what they're lifting, and it's pretty inspiring, but it's not this vision of super strong man deadlifting 1,000 pounds kind of thing. It's like a different version of that. People start seeing things that are more like realistic and attainable, and they just get a better sense of what's possible for them, and it can be a little bit different than someone on the front of a magazine or something that they've been led to believe that's possible or not possible. And that doesn't mean that the direction that they're going isn't worthwhile. It's just different.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah, would be
I
the
could,
biggest thing.
yeah, I could see that. I found that even back in the day when I owned I'm not sure if you're even aware of that, but I used to own
I
and
picked up
operate
on that. Yeah.
a fitness facility in Saskatoon. And I found that like our goal was just to help people lose weight at like 1 pound per week, sort of thing was kind of like our aim
Hmm.
and our
Yep.
objective. And I found that people were really discouraged by that and thought that they could do a lot more in the short term. And I found that that's possible. You can certainly do that, in the
Hmm.
short term, but it's not safe, it's not smart, it's not sustainable, and it's better
Hmm.
to just kind of go slow and steady, and having that conversation and being able to articulate the reasons as to why that is super helpful, and just kind of gives them a little bit of a different frame of reference when it comes to some of their expectations.
Completely. I mean, the expectation part is just, it is tough because you know, you don't want to tell someone what they want isn't going to work for them, especially at the beginning, because that's not going to help. It's not helpful, right? It's not one
Sure.
of those things where, but at the same time, yeah, if you're too realistic about it, like the chances are like you might take the wind out of their sails and they don't take the next step. So it's like we got to find that balance between it's like, yes, you can do that. It may look different for you, but that's okay. And we're going to find out through this process what you're able to achieve, what you can maintain, and what you learn throughout that. That's like the most important thing. And that's why I love this stuff is that like we talk about weight loss and we talk about muscle gain and changing your body and athletic performance and stuff. And it's like, it's just at the end of the day, it's the best. Of course, that's good for your health in most cases. But it's what you learn through the process. And it's just the best vehicle for, personal development because this is something that a lot of people struggle with that they don't feel like they have any control over. And once they learn that there's aspects that they can control and put effort into that, that feedback loop is just, it's amazing.
Totally.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, in what you do specifically, to what extent is it like the numbers, the science, the metrics, and things like that, the food and the weights, and to what
Mhm.
extent is it like the mindset or the emotion and the personal development aspect, and where does that fall for you?
I think historically, if you asked different educators and approaches around this stuff, people tend to like go one way or the other with
Okay.
this type of stuff in terms of like what's necessary and what's the most important. And the first thing you described is very much that like objective theoretical component of like how things work,
Yep.
which fundamentally like it governs the process, like without a
Sure.
doubt. Like if you wanted to gain 10 pounds of muscle, like we got to get you eating more protein, we got to get you eating more overall. Like there's all the things that like technically like should happen, right? Would be the biggest thing. So it's almost like the science is the how, but at the same time, that doesn't teach you much about like what someone needs to do and how to approach it and what makes it more manageable for them to do. So the way that like I like to teach this stuff is that like we call it in the Dr. Mark method, it's like structure and habits. And this
Hmm.
is like this is your budget and what you need to do and theoretically what should work. It's not
Yep.
everything, but without that, we're not really it's hard to tell if we're moving in the right direction and what we need to do to manage the things that matter. So it's like that's in place. But the flip side is this habit and behavioral piece tells us what someone needs to do within that structure, right? It gets them to stick with things. It gets them to believe it's going to work. It gets them to do the things that they need to do. And to me, it's almost like you need both of those things. And a lot of times, educators in this stuff, they'll go one way or the other,
Right.
right? That's more like, hey, you don't need to track everything you're eating. Let's just focus on these habits. But if those habits don't add up to, you know, what needs to happen to create results, it's like that part's really tough. But like kind of like let's think about like the scientist textbook people over here, academics that are like, well, theoretically, this is what you
Right.
should be doing and it should work. It's like, well, that makes sense. But what happens in reality can look a lot different, right? So it doesn't really, maybe it tells us our final destination, but doesn't really tell us the roadmap in terms of how to get there. So we got to balance both of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you hit the nail on the head there. That's like, this would work in theory. And if you hit all of these numbers, like, absolutely, the science says that it will work. Like, just follow the science. But we forget sometimes that, like, we don't live in a vacuum, and we
Completely.
have outside influences that, to a certain extent do have some power or control over what we think, what we feel, what we do
Mm-hmm.
in certain situations. And how do we factor or account for that, and to make sure that we're, making the best decisions, making sure that we're mindful of our choices, making sure that we're managing our emotions. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
about any of you guys listening, but I know that I can certainly be an emotional eater, and look to things on the outside, whether that food or drugs or alcohol, to make me feel something different. And if I'm not careful, that can totally unhinge a lot of my progress and the results that I'm looking to make. So,
Yeah. Well, I think the biggest thing is just acknowledging that, you know, that's a coping mechanism. And
right,
albeit like it's not terrible. It's one of them, right? Like one of those
right,
things where it's like it's not about the food, it's about what it does for you, right? Which is the biggest thing. So if you find other ways to manage that, it goes a lot
totally.
further. But yeah, those are all the things that play into, you know, this imperfect system. And I think being able to manage that and have a better sense of it, and sometimes just being aware of it, it goes a long way.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That awareness is key, isn't it?
Oh, totally. I think a lot of people they just don't have a really good idea of the things that they do and what holds them back and how to proceed, right? Like no one's, it's just tough for us to know. I mean, you think about, again, going back to some of the marketing stuff is like most people aren't even aware that they have the problems that they have,
Right. They're
right?
mostly unconscious.
Yeah, they're starting to warm up to the idea that like something isn't right here. I'm not going about it
Right.
the right way. But for the most of us, life gets busy and we just like go about, our lives and not really think about what we want and what's holding us back and, what needs to happen to live, healthy, vibrant lives. And the closer you can get
Right.
to like just getting a better sense of what that is, the better off you'll be.
Well, and we all have blind spots too, don't we?
Oh,
You know,
completely. I think and blind spots, biases, like all those
biases,
things. I mean,
sure.
yeah, like it's just the things that, we will and won't do, barriers, mindset blocks and that kind of stuff plays into everything.
Totally. So, you mentioned the importance of protein a couple of times. What are some of your like favorite ways or simple tricks or simple swaps that you can suggest to people to increase their protein intake?
I think if I was to look at most people's diets, it
Yeah.
seems like the first meal, breakfast meal, is one of those meals that like is just overlooked, be it like convenience foods, those type of things. So a lot of times people are missing that first 30, 40 grams just
Mm.
because they're eating something quick and convenient. That typically those type of foods don't lend towards being like higher in protein in the most part. So I would say like trying to make sure that you're including enough protein, which for most of us as like adult sized males is like at least 20 to 40 times every time grams every time you eat. That doesn't mean that you can't eat more, but just making sure that you're getting enough. And I think that breakfast meal is the one that's overlooked, right? Just because a lot of times, I mean, people are on the run, they don't sit down to make eggs or egg whites or that kind of thing. So a lot of times for me, it's like, hey, just toss some protein powder and oatmeal, or something along those lines can go a long way in terms of just
Totally.
like setting you up to not be way behind on your protein. And I like to almost think about it, it's like we call it the homework method, right? You save all your homework till the end of the day, you're gonna have a hard time getting it all done, right? So
Cool. I like that.
if you can get it ahead of it earlier, it seems to be helpful. So it's like that first half of the day. And if you think about just a conventional North American diet, that does seem to be the thing. It's like usually backloaded as people have like a sit down meal with their family at the end and they've barbecued a meat source finally, that kind of thing. But
Right.
maybe at lunch it's a sandwich just with like a few slices of deli meat
Right.
or you know like even something more processed pizza like doesn't like not gonna have tons of protein, might could have enough, but if you're not aware of those first two meals, it's hard to get enough in.
Totally. And if you look at the traditional kind of breakfast foods, it's always like cereal or toast or muffins or waffles or pancakes and,
Exactly.
those types of things. And it's like, where's the protein, for sure.
Exactly. Or like, and then, I mean, not to, we're just overly processed
Right.
protein sources that just have as much fat as they do
Mm,
protein, right? In terms of like bacon, sausages, that kind of stuff, which in
sure.
isolation may or may not be the worst thing for you, but it's like they don't go as far, right? And that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Um, I used to get a lot of questions about people asking about pre-workout and post-workout, and either supplements or meals or things like that. What's your favorite, or do you have a go-to something that you turn to?
In terms of like what to consume before, or in terms of like uh caffeine type stuff.
Either.
Either. I definitely, there's tons of research around caffeine being an extremely good ergogenic aid in terms of, bringing down your perceived exertion and allowing you to work more harder and that kind of stuff. So I'm very pro caffeine, and I typically, like, I don't know, I work out in the morning, so I will consume pre-workout first
Yeah.
thing and get to it and that kind of stuff. Um, but that would be I wouldn't by any means avoid that kind of stuff. And from a, we kind of touched on this earlier, the difference between like what should work and what actually works is like almost like in the science world they call this like efficacy and effectiveness. And efficacy is like theoretically what should work, and effectiveness is like that times multiplied by like what actually happens, like does someone actually do it, that kind of
Right.
thing. To me,
Right.
it's like if you take something that allows you to work out and makes it certain that you will, you're more likely to do it. And that part
Right.
to me is, as a coach, makes a lot of sense, because it's the thing
Totally.
that gets done is the one that you benefit from.
100%.
So to me, I'm like, yes, something that includes a good amount of caffeine, be it 200, 300 milligrams, is helpful in most cases.
Cool. One of
Yeah.
my favorite pre-workout drinks is what I call a shot in the dark. And it's
What's that?
a little shot of espresso inside a big cup of coffee. You can actually order them at Tim Hortons if you're interested. A little shot in the dark,
There you go.
and
Add it in.
yeah, totally. And I used to look forward to that. It was a bit of a treat for me, but it was also like you were saying, it was like that was kind of got the ball rolling for me to actually accomplish my workout, and so it was like a positive loop or reinforcing itself as far as
Yeah.
habits are concerned.
Oh yeah. Well, it's really habitual, right? Would be the biggest thing is
Totally,
like you start to feel a little more alert, fired up, like you start getting in the zone around like, this is what I'm here to do. This is time to focus. This is something I enjoy, that kind of stuff. And that is really rewarding.
totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Guys, we just have
Amen.
about 5 minutes left here before we're going to let Dr. Mark run. So if you guys have any questions or anything comes up for you, feel free to either unmute yourself or pop it in the chat. Looks like maybe Troy, you got something on
Yeah.
your mind there, Troy?
Yeah, Troy, you were
Yeah.
mixing something up earlier. I was curious about that. What was going on
Oh,
there?
that was just a cleaning solution.
Oh, all right. All right. It wasn't to consume. You could have lied to me. I would have
And
loved
then,
that.
and then my water, and then my water here.
Okay, gotcha.
Questions I just have two. One's about copper, about drinking out of a copper mug. I heard some negative thoughts on that. And the second one is, I've been taking creatine forever, and I just heard, well, someone told me in bro science, that you should cycle off creatine. But so I just want to know your thoughts on those two things.
Yeah, the second one, there's no real evidence to suggest you should cycle off, especially if you're just taking like, I would say any
Five
type,
grams.
you don't need to do, yeah, 5 grams of, monohydrate, some of them like you just well-studied stuff. Nah, there's no need to, there's no, maybe like from the lens of, could it be more stress on your kidneys to process it, that kind of thing. It's never been shown to be like you need to go
It's
off
one,
it.
it's
So
one of the most researched supplements, isn't it?
completely, yeah, without a doubt. I would say I can say pretty confidently that you don't need to go off it. I would just continue to take it. Yeah.
And then if you're a newcomer to it, there's no loading phase or anything. You just start taking it.
Well, you don't necessarily need to. It could be helpful for a lot of people just to like, because essentially what you're doing is like saturating your, cell creatine levels to do more work. So you can just get to that point quicker if you load it. But for most of us, it's like it's just not necessary, because you're gonna get there in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks anyway, instead of just the first week.
Okay. And when I just got my blood work done recently, and there's a category there that says creatine. Is that the same as the creatine supplement that I'm taking? No,
No, that one is creatinine, which can be
creat.
linked more to like muscle damage. So a lot of times what happens is like you tell your GP, I'm taking creatine, they see that, and sometimes it's just linked to like hydration status and some muscle damage in terms of like if you did a big heavy workout, like sometimes that's elevated within when you got your blood work. So people are kind of like, this sounds somewhat familiar. Like maybe we should stop doing that. No, you don't. I wouldn't put too much like thought into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on the copper intake with like from a cup or?
Are you like, is this like you got like a Moscow mule thing
Yeah,
going
that's what I
over
was
there?
thinking.
What's that? What's that?
The vodka grapefruit.
That's the only time I typically know people drinking out of copper mugs. So I guess that was the biggest thing. Do you drink out of that quite often? Like a
Well,
copper
no,
mug?
it's like I'm First Nations, and I know some of the some traditions, they drink out of the like a cup, like just a copper cup. And I've heard on YouTube or whatever some guys on YouTube that's saying that there's negative effects of the like not taking it just as a supplement. There is benefits of copper in supplements, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in some most multivitamins and stuff from like a mineral status,
Yeah.
like there's a minor amount, that kind of thing. But personally, I wouldn't be overly worried about a mug like that. Like I
Like
don't
I
think so.
personally don't I don't drink out of a copper mug, but I was just curious about that. That's all.
Yeah. No, nothing that I've come across in terms of like uh enough getting, into your actual water supply through the cup that I would be like concerned about. I could definitely look into it, but I wouldn't say it's something that you need to avoid.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
good enough.
Yeah, and just to clarify, what we are talking about is that like typically those Moscow Mule drinks are just consumed like an alcoholic beverage consumed in those copper mugs. Um, so it's like this completely different scenario than what you're describing kind of thing. But that's the only thing that jogged my memory. I was like, maybe Troy,
Okay.
maybe just Troy just likes drinking his water out of one of these cocktail drinks kind of thing, but that doesn't sound like the case. But either if it
Like to
was
be
that, I
different.
wouldn't I wouldn't avoid it.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks, Troy. I was curious, while we're on the topic of supplements here, Dr. Mark, are there any supplements that you would suggest, like on a real basic level, that every guy or every man should be taking, as far as either whether that's vitamin D or omega-3s or magnesium or
Yeah, I
creatine?
think it seems like for the most part, if you're living in the northern hemisphere during the winter, with or without checking blood work, it's pretty safe to assume you should be supplementing with vitamin D. Um, how much? Like I would say 1,000 to 2,000 IU's every day, which was like typically the caps come in 1 to 2.
Right.
It's probably best practice for you to just get routine blood work, once
Mm,
a year, maybe definitely in the winter, just get a sense of like ask for that to be included so that you have a sense of like, should you be taking more of that kind of thing? But that definitely would be one of them. I think there's not tons of risk. I would say the risk reward ratio around just taking a generic multivitamin is probably like in your favor in terms of like a good investment. I mean, you're basically going to spend $10 on it a month for like, a 3 month supply kind of thing. I would take that just to cover your basis, even if you are eating predominantly whole foods and that kind of stuff. So those would be two from like a vitamin mineral basis.
sure.
A lot of people that have lifted weights historically, like, consistently through time can, have lower levels of like zinc and magnesium. So like individually supplementing with those, like those can be helpful. It's one of those things a lot of people will take it like before bed and it seems to like be calming
Mhm.
as well. I don't remember when the ZMA supplements came out at the like maybe like 20-25 years ago. That was pretty important. I don't know if you remember the Barry Bonds scandal
Right.
stuff with
Sure.
that. They kind of blamed it on that, but it wasn't that. But those kind of things. So that could be helpful. But outside of that, like Troy mentioned, like creatine monohydrate, in terms of we're seeing like tons of research around not just for people lifting weights and trying to produce more power and do more work, but there's some cognitive benefits. We're starting to see it in
Sure.
like advanced populations in terms of like geriatrics and stuff, risks of falls. It's one of those things where I think it's like
Interesting.
not going to be like, I wouldn't say to the extent of brushing your teeth, but it's like people are going to be taking it. Like it's going to be one of those things that they continue to take and benefit from. So those would be one of those. And then probably the last one would be like, if you struggle to consume enough protein, I would consider taking some supplemental protein. That one just makes sense to me.
Right. Sure. Cover your bases, so to speak.
It's almost as like it's as close to real food as you're going to get supplemental wise. Like it's, it's milk derived. It's like
Right.
there's some research around there being health benefits to the actual individual like proteins and stuff, as well as contributing to your overall protein level. So it's like that's one of the ones where I definitely would not avoid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Which magnesium before bed?
What? Why? Or did you say?
Oh, sorry. I'm not sure if that was me. Which magnesium do you recommend before bed?
I'm trying to think of. I think in most cases, it's not. It wouldn't be. I'm pretty sure it's like magnesium aspartate.
Aspartate. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one that's in most supplemental forms. I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
Because
But
there's
yeah.
like three different ones, eh? Three different categories of magnesium, I believe.
yeah. I think like the other prevalent ones are citrate, right? Would be the other one. But I think it's aspartate. Maybe I'll look into that one though. That's definitely the one that's included. Citrate's the one that's included a lot of like the calm-based supplements, but I know when they put zinc and magnesium together, I'm quite positive it's magnesium aspartate, but I might be wrong. Yeah. The one of those things I'd play around with and see how you feel as well in terms of they're all marketed a little bit differently. But again, I think if you feel like you're under consuming that and maybe there's a bit of a deficiency, just taking one of them would probably be the most important thing.
Cool.
Yeah.
I just one more question. I want to be respectful of your time here, Dr.
Yeah, you
Mark.
bet.
But out of curiosity, one, I guess, I think that in today's day and age, a lot of people are looking to either increase a stream of revenue or supplement their income or do something that they're a little bit more passionate about and apply some interest as far as work is concerned. So can you tell us a little bit about the Dr. Mark method and also how somebody might learn more about you or work with you?
Yeah, totally. I think what we really carved out in terms of our certification program is like we cover the science of nutrition around like feeling confident that you know what you're doing, what you need to do. The program is very much like it's almost like macronutrients and metabolism at the university. It's almost like that type of course, but at the college level, like in very applied in terms of the science that we cover. But we also go through, it's like, okay, well, now we know what we're doing and what would, produce a result in the science behind that. But now how do we actually coach someone around like, someone says, hey, Matt, like I want to take protein powder, what should I be doing? It's like, well, what are your goals? And going through the process of making an assessment, putting together a plan, like packaging everything together, what pricing looks like, how to respond, how do you fulfill coaching, the actual service aspect and all those things, and social media and that type of stuff. So we cover that as well. And then at the end of the program, and it's a 90-day program, and at the end of the program, you actually go through that process with a test client as a practicum. So you put it all into action. So it's pretty well rounded when it comes to that stuff. We go through that. It's partially a course, but also partially a self-guided course, but also some live components in terms of seminars. So you come in, here's what I'm up to, here's what I'm working on. Let's troubleshoot some different questions and that type of stuff, and focus on that as well as like the business side of things. So we do that within the 90-day program. There's probably, if you wanted to check out more information about it, Dr. Mark with a C method.com is one of the best places to get more information, as well as like if you're interested in learning more about just nutrition coaching in general and what I'm up to in our approach, our YouTube channel is probably the best place to do that. We put out 2 long form videos every week around different topics and type stuff. So that'd be a good thing to check out.
Amazing. Right on. Well, for anybody listening, I'll attach a link to his YouTube channel at the bottom of the page in school here. And if you guys aren't following Dr. Mark on Instagram, it's Mark W. Morris, if I'm correct. And he's constantly sharing great content and helpful information, tons of value, and I highly recommend. So it's worth checking out for sure.
Awesome.
From the bottom of my heart, Dr. Mark, I want to thank you for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you finally in person and to spend some time with you today. So appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. I know you're a busy man, and I just wanted to say thank you. And I'm sure that tons of people got a ton of value out of our conversation today. So
thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, you bet. I'm glad to connect. And if there's anything that comes up from any of the discussions, feel free to pass it along.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much. Thanks, gentlemen. Hope you guys have a great rest of the day.
Okay, take care, guys. See ya.